Welcome to our Colorado 2023 trip. In August, on the 19th, we decided to fly out to Denver. This particular trip was from the 19th through the 27th, so it was just a little over a week. We planned this trip with a particular goal in mind where we were going to climb our first 14,000-foot mountain. Yay! So upon arrival, we flew into Denver, picked up our rental car, and we drove to our first stop, which was in Alamosa. And as you can saw there's this great sand dunes. That is a town that is located near there. And this particular stop was just to relax, get acclimated to the climate and the altitude. As we are from Kentucky, Colorado sits at a much higher elevation than our town does. Same for the temperature, the humidity level, it's all different. And as you can see here, we did have a guest visit at our Airbnb while we were there. After a night of well-rested relaxation, we decided to wake up early, grabbed our coffee, and took a short morning leisurely walk around the Great Sand Dunes before we headed out. If you haven't been to this area, the Great Sand Dunes are an amazing place to visit. You just see piles and piles of sand for like miles in the distance, and you can walk wherever you'd like. People go hiking, camping out in this area, and there's also a couple of shops that you can rent sandboards, and so it was very entertaining to watch a lot of the families that were making their way out early in the morning to go sledding down the sand. I will tell you, I struggled very much trying to walk through the sand. I don't know if sandals were a great idea, but it beats having piles of sand fill up in your socks and boots. Stayed in Ouray for a couple of days. As you can see here, once we got to Ouray, we got settled in, and since this 14,000-foot mountain hike was going to be our biggest challenge for this trip, we went to the grocery store. I started to gather a couple different things just based on how we handle certain hikes and how we've done in the past, trial and error more so than anything else. But as you can see here, I have a collection of different things, including hydration relief pouches that we can add to water, which will be very helpful because while we will be carrying a lot of the equipment, which you'll see here shortly, it's good to have backups for a multitude of different things. And so I had, bread, made sandwiches, and then we had fruit and some Gatorade and some ways to replenish ourselves once we completed the hike. Now on to the nitty gritty. We have all of the gear, as you can see, laid out visibly for me to kind of just check through and account for all the pieces that we were going to need for this hike. Main thing, we have our hiking boots. Both Chris and I have a very similar brand and style of shoe, so it's the Salomon hiking boots. I don't remember the exact number, but I will tell you they're very comfortable. They sit a little bit higher on the ankles, but honestly, they are pretty comfortable for the amount of hiking you can do and withstand a lot of that pressure. For this trip, while it is in August, we all wanted to make sure we prepared for any type of climate that we might encounter. So we did go ahead and buy micro spikes that can be placed onto our hiking boots just in case. Thankfully, we didn't have to use that, but better safe than sorry, and we were trying to be way more prepared than we have been in the past, which has always been our downfall. This time around, we're also bringing our helmets. And the reason being is we were going through a lot of the reviews, and upon reading the reviews, a lot of other past climbers have experienced loose rock and the potential, rock hitting you on the head, taking you out. You don't want to run into that issue. So having a helmet is just an added benefit. And then we have our first aid kit, which, travel first aid kit. It's always good to have one of those. That came in handy later on because I definitely got some blisters after our hike. Some long hiking socks that go really well with the boots and prevent a lot of that chafing and irritation. And then we both have a dedicated Columbia rain jacket, multi-purpose, to help break from the sun, the cool weather. Chris has some very particular climbing hiking pants that he uses. I also have a similar setup as well, which you will see here shortly. But yes, the jackets, it's always good to have the layers because while we are in the middle of August, you will be climbing elevations. It's going to get higher. It's going to be cooler. So you have to mediate both the temperature and any surroundings. And then we have our trekking poles, which have been such a great benefit. I don't know about you all, but I particularly hate descending off of very steep mountains, and the trekking poles have definitely saved our knees in that case. So these are going to be our water bladder packs. We have one 2.5 and one 3 liter bladder that we're both going to fill up and carry in our packs. So it's going to be a little bit of extra weight, which I'm not used to when I'm hiking. But here's my setup, very similar to Chris's. We have our boots, some sandals, the spikes, and then I will have not only my rain jacket, but I have come to love this Patagonia Houdini jacket, which it's not waterproof, but it's a very light shield, windbreaker, something that can give you an extra layer and is surprisingly warm for how thin it is and compact. And then I have a hat. I'm very particular about making sure I'm wearing my sunscreen, my hat, and then I will be having sunglasses as well. But this is us trying to get this chaotic mess together and going through each of the items for our trip. So the next morning when we woke up, it was around, I'd say 5 a.m. or so. We were heading towards Mount Sneffels. That was going to be the mountain that we were going to try to attempt and hike. The trail that we were going to take was a little bit more of a challenging trail, and it was going to start at the Blue Lakes Trailhead. As you can see here, it's about 40 minutes outside of Ouray, so the drive was not particularly our favorite, but it was the trail that we both agreed to do. And the road was a little bumpy and was not a very smooth road traveling up that. But we made it to the trailhead finally, and we got our setup going. And we had to whip out the headlamps because while we were beginning the hike, it was still dark, but the sun eventually rose, and we were doing really well as far as elevation gain, had gone maybe 1,000 feet or so within 30 minutes each. This particular hike, it said it was about 5,000 plus foot elevation gain. It's a 14,000 foot mountain, and this hike was a little bit longer in relation to the other options that they had. As you can see here, we took a couple stops, admire the views. But yes, this hike was in total about 14 miles. So you can tell that it was very much a challenge. The majority of the hike actually was pretty easy going up until the pass. and the views were pretty amazing, and the weather was absolutely beautiful, so I have no complaints there. So these are the two lakes that you reach right before the pass, which is where we took a short break along with a couple other people. But this is where the challenge actually began. Even though I would tell you switchbacks are pretty bad regardless. But this is where we put on our helmets and began the navigating through all the rocks. As you can see, we're not the only people up here, but it was a bit of a challenge because even with all the reviews of the path and the route and where to go, I'll be honest with you, it still was a bit of a struggle trying to find where to go because it wasn't always clear, and probably didn't help that we were following a couple here or there that were paving their own path, I guess you could say. And it was probably just making us way more confused. And this is where we kind of hit a little bit of an obstacle. We were assisting some new friends that we have made. But while they were assisting, I, as you can see here, I'm just admiring the view and enjoying a short little break before I continue the climb up to the peak. And we made it to the top only about an hour and a half later than when we planned on getting there. Like I said, we had a couple obstacles, but honestly, we were so happy that we made it to the top. And as you can see here, he's posing with the sign that we found up there that someone had left behind for any people that day. And what was so beautiful and surprising about this experience as well was Chris also proposed to me on top of the mountain. I was not expecting that at all. So way to round up an already amazing trip. And this is us hiking back down, taking in the views, and just trying to relax our legs, which I know will be super tired the next day. The next day was a much needed rest day, so we took leisurely stroll through town, visited some shops, and really just didn't have a plan for today. Took our time that morning. It was a little rainy that day, so it's good that we did the hike on Monday. And we got ourselves some breakfast and just enjoyed the ability to rest and recover. The day after that, I don't know what was going on, but we got a lot of recommendations to go check out this hike for Blue Lakes and Ice Lakes. Wait, sorry. Blue Ice Lake and Island Lakes. I think I'm getting the name wrong. But it was about 30 minutes south towards Silverton. And I will tell you, it was definitely well worth the hike. This was about 6 miles or so. My legs were definitely still tired, and I know Chris's were as well. But it allowed us to get out, get moving, stretch our bodies, and not just remain stagnant, and just actually have a hike that was very leisurely and no particular goal. I mean, look at that. That is amazing. It was super blue. So it was a great way to round up our visit near Ouray and after that we headed towards Glenwood Springs, which will be our last location before we head back out to Louisville. While we were in Glenwood Springs, we decided to hire a local climbing guide who took us on an interesting adventure where we got the opportunity to try multi-pitch climbing for the first time. I wouldn't say that I'm completely comfortable with it still yet, but I think this is a great learning experience. As you can see, this particular climb is right next to the highway, which we were very surprised when he took us there. But I mean, it's a testament to saying there are a multitude of different places and areas and locations where you can go climbing in Colorado. So we got to learn a lot from him, and it was definitely a unique experience. After a brief multi-pitch experience, we were then guided down to Rifle, Colorado, where we actually got to go to one of the parks and try all these other climbs there. And I will tell you, it was very nice and refreshing to try these new climbs. It built up a lot of my own personal confidence in how I felt climbing, so that was great. Overall, this trip was definitely a great success. Getting to climb for the first time and then completing that mountain, it exceeded all of our expectations, and I am so glad we get to share that with you all.